They had promised a welcome, respectful conversation. Prince Harry agreed to return to The View to discuss mental health advocacy and his new documentary project. He believed the host would focus on his causes, not controversy. That was the plan. Prince Harry entered the studio with calm confidence. He offered a gentle nod to each host. Whoopi Goldberg greeted him with warmth. She said, "It's great to have you back, Prince Harry. We're eager to hear what you've been working on." Harry said, "Thank you, Whoopi. Happy to be here." Joy Behar smiled politely. She said, "Prince Harry, last time you were here it sparked headlines. You talked about the monarchy, diversity. Tonight, you're here to talk mental health. Let's start there." Harry said, "Yes. My new film focuses on lived trauma and healing, and how we can all find strength by talking honestly." Sarah Haynes leaned in. She said, "That's important work. But your story is deeply personal, still tied to royal dysfunction. Does that conversation ever truly end?" Harry paused, voice calm. He said, "It's part of who I am. But tonight, I want us to focus on what unites us. Healing, compassion, understanding." Alyssa Farah Griffin nodded. She said, "That's powerful. So tell us, what's the biggest barrier people face when saying, 'I need help'?" Harry said softly, "Fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of being weak. Sometimes that fear comes from places of privilege, but the outcome is the same." The mood warmed. Hosts nodded in agreement. Then Joy Behar leaned in, tone sharp. She said, "Prince Harry, sometimes it sounds like you're asking people who didn't have your platform to just speak up. Is that fair?" Harry closed his eyes briefly, then said, voice measured, "Joy, I'm not asking people to speak alone. I'm asking for listening to each other." Joy narrowed her eyes. She said, "Words are easy, but action costs. When you left the institution you were born into, did you really sacrifice?" Harry's posture shifted subtly, dignified but firm. He said, "I sacrificed a life most people would take for granted. But what matters isn't my sacrifice. It's making sure that speaking out today means something tomorrow." A hush fell. The audience leaned in. Joy's expression hardened. She said, "That's rich, making it about something tomorrow. People without that cushion don't get tomorrow's chances." Harry nodded slowly. He said, "I understand consequences differ, but healing, courage, vulnerability, they're universal. They cost us all something." The air stiffened. Not anger, cold determination. Joy said again, voice steady, "So what do you say to someone who says you don't get it? That you had it easy compared to others?" Harry looked her in the eye. He said, "I say look at what I'm doing now, not what I was born into, and ask me to keep doing it." The audience shifted. The tone changed. Joy's mouth tightened. She said nothing. Prince Harry sat quietly backstage, eyes focused, hands folded in his lap. The producers had promised him this would be a calm segment, a lighthearted conversation about his recent charity work and his new mental health initiative. That was the pitch. And after everything he had endured with the press, with the palace, and with public opinion, he had agreed. But with conditions. No ambushes. No politics. No dragging Meghan into it. That was the deal. Inside the studio, the hosts of The View were already live on air. Joy Behar adjusted her glasses and glanced toward the side of the stage where Harry waited. Her tone was playful, but her eyes were sharp. Joy Behar said, "Well, folks, we've got royalty with us today. And I don't just mean Whoopi. Prince Harry is back in the building." The audience laughed politely, but not everyone was smiling. Prince Harry stepped onto the stage as the crowd applauded. He greeted each host with a handshake. Whoopi Goldberg smiled warmly. Sarah Haynes offered a friendly nod. Sunny Hostin watched him carefully. And Joy Behar didn't stand. Joy Behar said, "So Harry, welcome back. Or should I say, welcome to America." Again, Prince Harry smiled, just barely. He said, "Thank you, Joy. It's good to be here." For the first few minutes, the conversation stayed on safe ground. Prince Harry spoke about the Invictus Games, about supporting veterans, about the struggles soldiers face long after the fighting stops. The audience listened respectfully. Even Joy nodded occasionally. Then Sunny Hostin asked a question. Sunny Hostin said, "Harry, you've been vocal about mental health, about trauma, about institutional pressure. But some critics say you've used your platform more to settle scores than to build bridges. How do you respond to that?" Prince Harry said, "I talk about what I've experienced. Not to attack, but to explain. Silence helps no one, especially not the people still stuck inside systems that punish emotion and discourage honesty." It was a thoughtful answer, but the tone of the room shifted slightly. Joy Behar leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. Joy Behar said, "Let's talk about honesty then. You left the royal family saying you wanted privacy. But now there's a Netflix deal, a memoir, interviews, documentaries. That doesn't exactly scream, 'Leave me alone,' does it?" Prince Harry paused. He said, "Wanting privacy doesn't mean disappearing. It means choosing when and how to share your story. That's a right everyone deserves." Joy Behar said, "Even when the story drags other people through the mud?" The audience murmured. A few clapped. Others shifted uncomfortably. Prince Harry said, "I tell the truth as I lived it. If that makes some people uncomfortable, maybe that discomfort is part of the problem." Joy Behar's smile faded. She said, "Or maybe you just didn't like being held accountable. It's easy to play the victim when you're on a book tour." Sarah Haynes tried to interject. She said, "Let's keep this constructive." But Prince Harry didn't flinch. He said, "Do you think being open about trauma is playing the victim? Or do you just prefer stories that protect institutions over people?" Joy Behar said, "I prefer not to see billionaires lecture working people about struggle." Prince Harry said, "I didn't inherit my title by choice, but I've tried to use it differently than most. That's not a lecture. That's a decision." Joy Behar said, "Yeah, and cashing in on it too." The tension in the room was thick now. Whoopi leaned forward slightly, sensing what was coming. Whoopi Goldberg said, "Let's be fair, Joy. He's done more for mental health in 3 years than most people in 30. Joy Behar said, "He's also made a living airing family laundry on prime time. If he wasn't a prince, no one would care what he had to say." Prince Harry looked at her calmly. He said, "That might be true. But if I wasn't a prince, I wouldn't have experienced what I did. And that experience is what I speak from. Not entitlement, but survival." That line landed. The room was silent for a moment. Even Joy didn't respond right away. Sunny Hostin said, "Harry, when you criticize the monarchy, some Americans hear that as criticism of tradition, of family. What do you say to people who feel offended on behalf of your relatives?" Prince Harry said, "I say that honesty isn't betrayal, and loyalty that demands silence in the face of harm isn't loyalty. It's complicity." Joy Behar said, "Or it's called growing up and moving on." Prince Harry turned toward her. He didn't raise his voice. Prince Harry said, "You think healing is the same as pretending it didn't happen?" Joy Behar said, "I think a lot of people have real problems. And hearing about a man who grew up in a palace complain about his father isn't helping anyone." Prince Harry said, "And I think telling people they have to be poor to have pain is exactly why so many suffer in silence." That stopped her. Joy Behar said, "So you're the face of suffering now?" Prince Harry said, "No, I'm just one person who refused to stay silent. Because I've seen what silence costs. And I won't ask anyone else to pay it." The conversation wasn't calm anymore, but it wasn't shouting either. It was something heavier. Whoopi Goldberg looked to the producers offstage. The countdown clock was flashing red. They were over time. But Joy Behar had one more thing to say. Joy Behar said, "Do you think Meghan's ever going to apologize for how she dragged this country's relationship with the royals into the mud?" Prince Harry didn't blink. He said, "Do you think people should apologize for telling the truth about how they were treated?" Joy Behar said, "I think people should take responsibility for the chaos they cause." Prince Harry said, "Then maybe this show should apologize." for pretending to be interested in healing when all it really wants is spectacle. The air left the room. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or not. Prince Harry turned toward the cameras. Prince Harry said, "If your story doesn't fit the headline, they'll twist your pain into performance. But that doesn't mean you stop telling it. It means you tell it louder." He stood up, quietly, dignified. He didn't storm off. He didn't slam his chair. He just left. And the studio sat in stunned silence. The producers cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Prince Harry's last words echoed offstage. The control room scrambled. The teleprompter went dark. And on set, no one moved. Joy Behar sat motionless, her face frozen between disbelief and defiance. Whoopi Goldberg leaned back slowly in her chair, arms folded across her chest. Sarah Haynes whispered something to a producer, her voice tight. Sunny Hostin rubbed her forehead with the side of her hand. No one said anything for a full 30 seconds. Then Joy Behar broke the silence. Joy Behar said, "Did that just happen?" Whoopi Goldberg said, "It did." Joy looked toward the stage exit, where Prince Harry had disappeared just moments ago. Her voice dropped a register. Joy Behar said, "He ambushed us." Sarah Haynes said, "You asked him if his wife should apologize on national television. What did you expect?" Joy shot her a look. She said, "I expected him to answer like a grown-up, not storm off with a mic-drop speech." Sunny Hostin didn't look up. She said, "He didn't storm off. He walked out. Calm. Composed. You're the one who kept poking the bruise." Joy Behar said, "Oh, please. He's a global figure. He should be able to handle a few questions." Sarah Haynes said, "That wasn't a question, Joy. It was a trap." Joy Behar turned, sharp. She said, "Since when did asking for accountability become a trap?" Whoopi spoke again, quiet but firm. Whoopi Goldberg said, "Since the question wasn't about accountability. It was about humiliation." Backstage, Prince Harry was already in the car. He declined press interviews. He didn't check social media. His phone was off. His team said nothing. But the footage was already moving. Clips of the exchange flooded timelines before the next segment had even begun. Headlines split in two directions. Some called it a masterclass in calm defiance. Others framed it as a prince out of touch with basic scrutiny. But what struck most viewers wasn't the content. It was the tone. Prince Harry hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't insulted anyone. He had simply drawn a line. And then he had walked away. And that unnerved people more than shouting ever could. Inside the studio, Joy Behar was still trying to regain control of the conversation. Joy Behar said, "So now I'm the villain for asking a tough question?" Whoopi didn't answer. Neither did Sarah. Sunny Hostin finally said, "No one said you were the villain, Joy. But maybe it's worth asking why you were so eager to make him the villain." Joy Behar looked away. She said nothing. Later that afternoon, a follow-up statement was issued from Prince Harry's team. It was brief. Prince Harry appeared on The View today to discuss mental health and global service. He hopes conversations in the public sphere can move beyond provocation towards something more human. He remains committed to that work. He never mentioned Joy by name. He didn't need to. The moment had already passed into something larger than either of them. That evening, segments from the interview aired on nearly every major network. Commentators debated whether Joy had gone too far, whether Harry had handled it with grace, or used it to elevate himself once again. But in the quiet spaces between those arguments, something else happened. Clips of Harry saying, "If your story doesn't fit the headline, they'll twist your pain into performance," went viral. Not just on political feeds, but in support groups, in mental health forums, in veteran communities, in classrooms. Because it wasn't just about royalty anymore. It was about the cost of being honest when honesty is inconvenient. It was about standing calmly while being provoked. It was about saying enough. The next morning, Joy Behar tried to reset the narrative. She opened the show with a tone of mock humility. She said, "So I guess I'm trending now. Again. You'd think I ran over someone's corgi. The audience chuckled, nervously, but the rest of the panel didn't laugh. Whoopi Goldberg kept her arms crossed. Sarah Haynes was visibly uncomfortable. Sunny Hostin didn't even look in Joy's direction. Joy continued. She said, "Let's be honest, folks. These days, if you ask a celebrity a question that isn't fawning, you're suddenly the bad guy. Or in my case, the bad woman." Whoopi finally spoke. Her voice was even. She said, "It wasn't the question, Joy. It was the intent." Joy said, "What? I can't ask him about Megan." Sunny looked at her and said, "You didn't ask him about Megan. You demanded an apology. There's a difference." Joy didn't respond right away. She looked down at her notes, then up at the camera. For a moment, she looked exactly like what she often criticized, someone who couldn't take the heat she loved to dish. Meanwhile, Prince Harry said nothing. No follow-up interviews. No clarifying tweets. No podcast segments. He simply returned to his work, met with veterans, sat with grieving families, visited schools. Quiet, consistent action that spoke louder than any rebuttal ever could. But the conversation he left behind on The View didn't die out. Instead, it spread. Clips of Joy's confrontational tone were placed side by side with Harry's restraint. Audiences drew their own conclusions. Some defended Joy, saying it's her job to push. Others saw in her questions a familiar cruelty, one that punishes people who speak from pain instead of polish. But what changed wasn't just public perception of a television segment. It was something deeper. People who had never liked Prince Harry found themselves reconsidering. Not because he argued, but because he didn't. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't name-call. He didn't run from the discomfort. He stood still inside it. And for a culture drowning in noise, that stillness felt radical. Weeks later, when asked about the moment on a panel for veterans' mental health, Harry addressed it with one sentence. He said, "I didn't leave that stage because I was hurt. I left because some battles don't deserve your energy." And maybe that was the point all along. Because sometimes the loudest person isn't the one who wins. Sometimes the person who says the least says the most. This is Soulful Stories. Subscribe if you believe silence is not always weakness. And sometimes, walking away is the most powerful truth you can speak. Subscribe not for drama, but for dignity. Not for outrage, but for clarity. Not for noise, but for stories that show what strength really looks like. Because here, we don't just talk about the moments that go viral. We honor the ones that matter.